I'm Kyle Gatlin, pastor at the church that you're watching or sitting in, wherever the case may be. And I thank you for being a part of worship today, or just watching this video, whenever it is. We are in the midst of just a really quick 3-part series called Thanks for Giving. And different nuances about this, but because this is Veterans Day weekend, I wanted to take a moment at all of our services, truthfully, just to tell all those who have served our country in the armed services to say thanks, because you have given. You have given, probably given more than you ever thought you would give, and because of the gift to our country, we live in freedom, and we live in a country that we're proud to live in, and we just want to say thank you for those who give, those who really continue to give, our active military as well. Today we welcome Mark McDuffie. Mark McDuffie is a veteran, and I'm going to get ready to introduce him to you, and he's going to tell you where, when, and how he has served our country. So, Mark, thank you for giving to our country. So, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I was born and raised right here in the Wiregrass in Geneva, Alabama. Upon graduating high school in 1997, I said there had to be more to this country than Southeast Alabama, and I wanted to go see it. So I took off and joined the United States Airforce right here in Dothan, Alabama. And I had a wonderful career. Got to see a lot of beautiful places, some not so great, but it was all part of this life journey that we're on, and I wouldn't take anything for it. And I actually had it, and I retired in 2009. From Eglin Air Force Base, so it was nice to be able to come back home. Didn't know that was going to be my last assignment, my retirement, but things happen, and so I retired out of Eglin Air Force Base, and just thankful to be a veteran, thankful for the opportunity to serve our country along with the many others that come before me, and I want to thank especially the congregation here, the veterans here in your congregation, because without them that came before me or the ones now, then I wouldn't have been able to do what I did. Especially the Vietnam veterans, a special thank you for your service to them, because as you know, after I was injured and when I come home, the red carpet was rolled out for wounded veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And it wasn't for the sacrifices of the Vietnam veterans, none of that would be possible. So a special thank you to each and every one of you.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about the injury and recuperation, all that stuff. What happened there?
So I was a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. A lot of people are not familiar with that. The television show NCIS, okay. But it was a lot of that. So I was part of a weapons intelligence team in 2007 over in Ramadi, Iraq. It was the day right after the the tornado came into Enterprise, Alabama, and destroyed the school, and those individuals were killed there. So I remember talking to my dad, and I'm like, hey, he was the principal at Daleville High School, now currently the principal at Northside Methodist, and I said, hey, I'll email you back in a little bit when I get back in. I got to run out for a few hours, and it was just like an ordinary day, and I got hit by an IED, a roadside bomb, as we know it today, and changed my life forever. But looking back on it, 15 years later now, I can say it was the worst day of my life became the best day of my life, if that makes sense. And I felt like leading up to that, I'd been on a lot of deployments around the country, around the world, and always the first one to raise my hand and say, hey, that sounds cool, I want to go do that. But when I got notification that this one was that this deployment was coming up, I just had that feeling in my stomach that something just didn't feel right. Like it was, and I did some preparation that maybe I've never done in the past. But looking back on it, being the investigator, I tried to go back and look at every scenario and completely believed that God was getting me prepared to go through the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life. and he prepared me along the way as well as through it, and obviously today. But it was comfort. At the time, I didn't understand the comfort inside of it, but looking back on it, so thankful for those things that I had to do, to the point of sitting down with family and having that hard conversation. Like, if something happens, when something happens, my brother, I said, I need you to be the rock of the family. You need to. My wife and I had been married about 5 years, so no kids. I'm like, you're the one that has to be the rock of the family. He's a police officer of 25 years, and if anybody I felt like could deal with something like that from his day-to-day stuff, he could do that. And I was like, you got to notify my parents, and you got to handle with all the bad stuff, the arrangements, that kind of things. And I just felt like something was going to happen to me. It was a weird feeling. And March 2nd, 2007, got up, ordinary day. Everything starts as an ordinary day, and responded to an IED in the city of Ramadi, and it detonated and killed 2 guys that was with me and seriously injured me. A lot happened there, and I guess I was unconscious probably about 15 minutes, and when I came to, a firefight had ensued. I mean, that was the terrorist MO at the time, was to, get you dazed, and then obviously they wanted to kidnap you for ransom or whatever that may be. And so, a firefight had taken off right after the explosion, and I just remember like hearing it, a little bit of it, but there's nothing I could do. But I was calm. Normally I might have been the person that would panic in a situation like that. I'm not sure how, but it was just like I was calm. I was like instructing the medics on how to take care of it. This is what we need to do. This is how I need to get out. I didn't understand everything that was going on around me, and that, the guys I was with were killed at the moment. But I was calm. I was at peace, and if that was it, then I was okay with that. But they got me out, and I was able to get to the hospital, and long story, and we can go into that. 6 months at Walter Reed, 58 surgeries, and to be able to say I stand before you today is unbelievable, because a lot of those 58 surgeries were on my lower extremities, and that's where I received a lot of my injury, and just thankful to be alive. Growing up, my grandfather was a Baptist preacher in Central Florida, so I knew what a Christian was. I knew what I was supposed to do and not supposed to do. But, I was a good boy on Christmas time, Thanksgiving, spring break, when I was around my grandfather, So, but at 27 years old, going into that, I thought I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof, I obviously believed in God, but, my problem was I only sought him when I needed him, but he was there with me the whole time. So I thought I could handle things on my own. I thought I could control situations. I didn't turn everything over to him, and that's something that I feel like I have a hard time with today, is just being able to leave everything in his hands, because the way that we're wired and through the military, and you feel like your best interest is how you can handle it. You need to have your hands on everything, and he has a way of showing us, hey, just be patient. I have this, and that's where I'm at today, trying to do that. But going back to some of the things I was telling you about, things happened that I had that gut feeling. But so after that, so the morning before my injury was a Sunday morning, and I woke up and I had nothing to do in Iraq that morning. It's like the war had come to a stop for a day. And those days were far and few between. So it was Sunday morning. I was like, maybe I feel like I need to go to church this morning, something to do. So I went to church, took a young airman with me, and we went, and they had a baptism that day. A soldier had received Christ right there, and they did a baptism that day. And it was just, when I left there, I felt that was part of that feeling at peace, because I really felt at peace. I felt great. I was walking back to where we lived at, our little compound, and there had been an attack the day before, and they were bringing a lot of injured soldiers into the base. As I was walking back, I found myself next to a little bitty tree, not many trees over in the desert, and I stood there next to this tree because I was about 150 yards away from the hospital, the little makeshift hospital we had on that outpost. And I found myself just stopped, and I'm watching. I'm watching the Humvees come in. I'm watching the tanks. I'm watching them take soldiers off the back. But I felt like that was part of that peace, because I got to witness the day before that the next day that was me in the back of the tank. So I knew I knew the process, what was going to happen when I got back, how they were going to roll with, how they were going to get me in and out and to the hospital. So that was another clue I think God threw me that said, hey, I have you. When I'm going back and looking at it, God said, hey, I had you. Just trust in me and believe in me and leave it to me. And so that was one of them. And then when I got to Walter Reed, it was the 2 days before I got to Walter Reed, the Washington Post and all that, those newspapers, CNN, all broke that how awful Walter Reed was, if you remember back that 2007. So I'm there 2 days after, but man, you're talking about God just working, assembling a medical team. Like, I had some of the top orthopedic surgeons in this country. They could be making so much money in the private sector, but they was there to serve a purpose too, and that was to put soldiers back together. And they did that with honor. And, and going through that whole surgeries and people visiting, it was hard to see it at the time, because I was 27 years old, and I was, after the injury, when I got there, I wouldn't even look at myself in a mirror. I was broke. I was physically broke. I was emotionally broke. I was spiritually broke. And then as a young airman, you're always financially broke. So I was 27 years old, laying in a hospital bed, and I needed someone to help me do every day-to-day necessities that we have. So it took a toll on me, and I just had people that came by and just kept building me up and telling me that, God's got this under control. There's a plan. There's a purpose for this. And it's hard to see that laying in that hospital bed. But just so thankful that he spared me. I was prepared. If that was it, I was okay with it. But, man, I feel like there's so much more to offer and so much more to do now in his glory. And I think that's where I'm at today is, obviously, I have children now. So I want to be that father that I can be, that husband that I can be. I work with other nonprofit organizations with veterans, and that's sort of been my thing. That was my way of giving back. It started off when I met Jeep. He really didn't have his organization going, and me and Lance that's here this week, we would go around and we would have our chance to share our testimony at churches. Because we always thought that, there was this big board, everybody that was praying for you when you were injured, it would just be lighting up all over. And so, especially coming from little small town South Alabama, where most, the southern hospitality is unbelievable in this area, it was an honor to be able to, one, get back in these churches, to say thank you to people that prayed for us, whether we knew them or didn't know them, but two, be able to share a testimony about what we went through and how we plan on continuing to go forward. I say I don't take anything from my military career, and I don't take anything from my injury, but that doesn't define who I am. That was just a chapter, and I feel like the chapters after that is unbelievable at what they can be.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jeep. Just to clarify, I came to know Jeep through Hits for Heroes, which technically started years ago. Actually, when my son was in high school playing baseball, was when it started. And then Angela Dunning picked up the mantle of Hits for Heroes, and it's all about helping those in the Wounded Warrior Project. And really, Jeep is our local affiliate that works with veterans all the time. That's basically what he does. And so you've been affiliated with that ministry, that Jeep Sullivan. Is that
right?
Out
of Bonifay? Yep.
Yeah, and so Hits for Heroes locally has been doing a baseball fundraiser every February, early March, something like that, every year, raising money for those wounded warriors. And you've literally, not only have you given to our country, Mark, but you're giving back through this ministry, right? So, and I think we were texting back and forth. You were with some folks recently, right?
I was. Matter of fact, I was out in New Mexico, and I'm leaving. The reason I couldn't be here for Veterans Day for your service is because I'm leaving this Sunday morning, headed back out to New Mexico. Going back to the Hits for Heroes. When Angela started that and we got involved, I can remember me and Angela's put some miles in all these different schools, but it was awesome because I had a chance to go witness, speak to these high school kids, the whole high school, because we would go in and talk about Hits for Heroes to the schools, and it was just a great opportunity that I could share Christ to a school. In today's times, that can be pretty hard to do, and so that was awesome. The Hits for Heroes is, it may not be a 501 ministry, but it's really, God is working in that organization tremendous. And so it's been an honor to do that, going with Jeep. But going back to when Jeep started, and I was sort of doing a Wounded Warrior fishing thing, because that's where my passion and what helped me was on the water. And so we would go share our testimony and use that to be able to do that. And we would buy Bibles and give Bibles to soldiers, because we took it for granted. Like, I probably had numerous Bibles from my grandfather's buying them probably from the day I was born. But a lot of people, I met a guy that was 40 years old that never had a Bible presented to him. No one ever took the time to present him a Bible. And what can, even if you're talking to someone and they're not open to it yet, but my theory was, if that Bible lays on that coffee table long enough, you're going to open it and start looking at it. So that was how we started. Well, really, when this thing all started, and we don't have enough time for me to tell you where I've seen God enter in all these different things we've been doing. And I think that's our focus now, because obviously as a country, we need God more than anything, and it's just our way to, one, trust in Him and share the message.
Yeah, and it sounds like to me that that part of your recovery and recuperation, you recognized that God was there, and that you recognized at some point in that journey of recuperation, and then getting out and starting your life back post-military, that Jesus was there all the time in your life. And I don't know if it was an awakening or what was that process, real quick.
And it really wasn't a way. It was like, hey, I'm here in the good times and bad times. Yeah. You don't have to just come to me in your darkest times. Come to me every day. And I was more of, I was selfish. I was more, whenever I would pray, it was like, I need, instead of thanking you, for your son and just saving my life, that it was really the only thing that got me out of that bed and got me back to where, I'm in New Mexico next week, 14 years later, and I'm climbing 11,000 foot mountains. I'm chasing game around, but times you just stop and look back over the mountain and just look at His creation, and it's overwhelming. No words can explain it. You just have to say thank you.
And Mark, again, I want to reiterate, thank you, first of all, your service to our country, but just the changes you are helping come about in other veterans, that you realize just through your experience that there's something about having Jesus alongside in the recuperation process that actually will make things a whole lot better for our veterans.
So much easier for the, and I suffer from times with anxiety gets real high, that you always have someone there, and you have to call out to him. Just a quick thing, one example of that is I have a fear of interstates and bridges, which makes it hard to travel because I associate that to other things. Yeah. But like I can now, I just actually relocated from the Tampa area back up here to the Wiregrass, and so there's a couple, there's some bridges you have to go, but it's so just, that's my way of coping with it. You just start talking to him, and I think sometimes we make religion really complicated, but it's that relationship and just talking to him, just, you're here with me. I need you right now. I thank you, and just have that conversation. To me, it's been tremendous helping me with my anxiety.
Well, and I appreciate your openness, your honesty with not only just yourself, but with those veterans that you're meeting with. I think that's a wonderful service, because not everybody can identify with what our veterans have gone through and how they're trying to get back and live in the world. It's something that I don't understand. A lot of people watching this don't understand, but you've been there, you've done that, and by the grace of God, you're still helping people go through that.
Because what's the latest number? And I think the number may even increase. You hear 22 all the time, suicides. That's. I'm not. The government takes care of you best they can, maybe, without getting in the whole of that. But sometimes there's something better than a handful of medication. That a lot of times they want to push on to. I was 27 years old and taking 3 handfuls of medication a day. You can't live off of that. But that's just what they prescribed, and it was. There's other ways, and I honestly believe my spiritual, God He's brought me through those hard times where I can share this now, where I can say, hey, I've been there. I can relate to some of those other veterans, and but let me show you what helped me, and I think that's my whole purpose for being here today.
Well, great. Thank you again for sharing with us. Thank you for continuing not to just share your life, but to share Jesus with those who are hurting and who need help and who need hope. And thank you for being a mouthpiece for God and His hands and feet.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me come speak today. I know Angela's heard us 1,000 times. It's probably getting boring to her, but my name is Specialist Lance Gieselman, United States Army retired. I served with Alpha Company 367 Armor Division, the Hounds of Hell out of Fort Hood, Texas. I was deployed to Iraq in 2003. A little bit about me before then. I was captain of my high school football team. I played college football for 1 year before I lost my academic scholarship, and that's what led me to the Army. And when I decided to join the Army, I wanted to do the coolest thing that they had, and that was tanks. I thought it was amazing to be able to run over trees and not feel it, blow things up. It was the best job I ever had. We were tasked with the mission to patrol the whole eastern side of Iraq when we first got there. We were looking for certain key people and patrolling the roads. A lot of checkpoints where we checked people for RPGs and weapons they weren't supposed to have. But the week this happened, we were tasked to guard a water pumping station. The water pumping station fed water to all the crops that the farmers had, and they were afraid that insurgents would blow it up. So we were there to guard it. There was 8 of us, so there's 4 per tank, so there's 2 tanks there. Well, that day, we had been working on one of the parts, 2 or 3 hours before we figured out that the only way to get the part off was to get a tool from the mechanic, that we would meet up at 5 o'clock. So that day we decided we were going to play football. I don't know how many, I can barely see out there, but if there's any kids, well, some of you guys about my age would know. Remember when we were in grade school and we picked teams outside on the playground for football? You had the popular kid that had all the good talent, and then you had me over here that had all the rest. Well, I'm super competitive, but I mean, you can only do what you got with your talent you had. My gunner, Mike Barrera, he was from Texas, Mexican guy. I loved him. He was like my brother. They called me Gies. And I remember that day, he probably scored 5 touchdowns in the first 5 minutes and thoroughly whooped my team. It was embarrassing. I hate losing. But after we finished playing football, it was time to go pick up log pack, where we pick up food and fuel and our mail for the section that was at the water pumping station. But it wasn't our turn that day. But since the guys had been helping fix our tank, we told them we would take theirs and go pick up everything and read their mail and eat their food. So off we went. It was probably a 2 or 3 mile drive from where the water pumping station was. And we got there, and they had not MREs, but real food. From the time we were there, we got there in like April, I think it was. Yeah, it was April. From April till October, every meal, night and day, was MREs, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We didn't have anything else but MREs, because our section would go take over a town, secure it, go on to the next town, secure it, and we just leapfrog like that. We never had like a home base. We had FOBs, but we never had a home base until about October, and they had built a chow hall. And you can look at me and tell me I like to eat, but they had brought beef stew, and it was like Denny Moore's on steroids. It was amazing. And I remember that day, Mike had gotten a letter from his sister, and Mike was fiercely defender of his sister. You couldn't say anything nice about her. He'd want to punch you. He loved his sister, and he loved that girl from the first Spider-Man, that Kirsten Dunst. He was in love with her. And you couldn't talk bad about her either. He'd want to beat you up. And he was really proud, because a week or two, he was going to get his own tank, and he was going to be a tank commander. I remember how proud he was of that, because his family, everyone in his family was a tanker, and he was finally going to get his own tank. We left the fuelers and the MPs, and we're going back to the pump house where we were guarding, and we saw a little white truck coming down you can probably see on the pictures, that's the canal. It's really narrow. It's really only like a 1-lane road. And we had to pull off a little bit to let this little white truck go by so we wouldn't run it over. And after that truck went by, we cruised up a little bit more, and we got to where the intersection where we had to pivot steer the tank to turn to go left. And I looked over to my left side. I was in the loader's hatch, just sitting up top, And I was like, I was like, there's a goat over there. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's a goat. And I blinked, and when I stopped blinking, I was on the ground. I don't remember getting blown up. I remember looking, blinking, waking up on the ground. And I remember I looked this way, and my foot was up here by my head. I was like, how did that happen? It had paralyzed, it crushed my L1 vertebrae. They said it looked like baby powder on the x-ray. It had paralyzed me from about here down, so I couldn't feel the injuries that were lower than here. But I was just like, why is my leg up here? This is weird. I must have broke my leg. Then I tried to roll over because I could kind of see the outline of the tank. And when I rolled over, there was a piece of shrapnel that went through my body armor that stopped right next to my heart. And when I rolled over, I pushed it further in. And I was like, I can't roll over. I can't lay on my back. What am I going to do? And this was 2003. I was 23 years old. I was a smart butt when I was in the Army. We were very professional about what we did, and we didn't like to lose. And being ultra competitive, in my mind, when I saw the outline of the tank, this is what was going through my mind. I can crawl to the tank, radio for help, and I'll get a cool medal out of the deal. That was the only thing that was going through my mind. Not, I'm going to die. Not, where's everybody else at that time? I'm going to crawl to that tank, and I'm going to radio for help. And they're going to come, and I'm going to get a cool medal out of the deal. That was what was going through my head. And so I started crawling towards the tank, and I thought I heard it go into gear, and I thought Isaac didn't know that I'm on the ground. He's going to run me over. So I crawled back away from the tank. Finally, I ran out of steam, and I just laid there and prayed. I said, God, let me see my wife and my son one more time before I go. And then I heard Mike. He was probably about where the exit sign was. And he was screaming for me, Geese, where are you? I couldn't answer back because it had knocked the wind out of me. Actually, it collapsed my lung, but I didn't know that at the time. And I couldn't answer back first. And finally, I got up in a breath, and he said, Geese, are you okay? And I said, no. I said, are you okay? And he said, no. And then he started screaming for Isaac. And it was just constant. We called him Kuko. He wanted to be an MMA fighter. He was really good at it too. And I remember Mike just screaming for him. And then I saw that, because I was laying on my back, and I saw the white truck coming down the canal, and I told Mike, I said, Mike, play dead. So as we were laying there, you hear the doors open, you hear they're about to shoot me in the back of the head. So I started praying, and I remember when I was younger, all the way up from the age of 12 to 18, we used to go to a Bible camp in Ironton, Missouri. It was called Day Spring. It was in the Ozark Mountains. And they would sing songs at chapel. One of them was, this is one of the songs I was singing on the ground. I don't even remember. But we would sing Amazing Grace to the key of Lion King. It's like a wing away, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Woo, woo, woo. I was singing that on the ground to myself. I don't know why. And then I switched over to when we do the campfires, and it was serious time when people were coming to the Lord. And it was Micah 6:8. He's like, He has shown thee, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of thee. And I was singing that on the ground. I don't know why. I just was. And after I finished praying and thanking him, that guy stepped right here because I felt the dirt fall on my hand. I was like, well, here we go. And then I said, amen, and something spooked them, and they jumped back in their truck and left. And then it just got real quiet for a while. And then Mike started back again screaming for Isaac. And it was getting cold, and I felt the ground start shaking, like an earthquake. I mean, the dirt was moving, everything. And I just happened to look up, and I saw headlights, and it was my tank. They had jerry-rigged it to work, and I seen them coming down the road, and then slamming on the brakes right there in front of the hole that the bomb had left, and they were teeter-tottering over it. And then finally they went down it, and then came back up it, and they stopped right there. And it was so quiet outside that you could hear what they were saying in the tank. And I remember his nickname was Cheeks. He looked like a mouse. He had big hamster-like cheeks. And I remember him saying, "Where's the tank?" And then Sergeant Navarro said, "Where's the crew?" Oh, he's like, "There's the turret. Where's the other half?" You know, I could see him jump off the tank, and he went over to Mike first, and he asked Mike if he was okay, what he needed. He's like, "Go check on Gies and Kuko." So he went over to check on me, and of course my foot was up here by my head, and I'm a dipper. I've been dipping for a long time, and I had a bunch of mint grizzly in my mouth. And he asked if there was anything he could do. I said, I was smart aleck. I was like, and I wasn't in a lot of pain, but it was enough. And I said, "Can you put my leg back where it's supposed to be?" And he said some explicit words, and I said, no, really, I need a bottle of water, because if I pass out, nobody's going to want to give me CPR with this in my mouth. So he went over and looked for Isaac Kuko, and he was our driver. And I remember I couldn't see him, but I heard him jump up onto the hull, and he's banging on the driver's hatch. And he was a Marine before he was Army, and Marines don't cry. I've never seen a Marine cry or whimper, but I could hear him just crying. I've never heard a man cry before, and when he started crying, I was like, "What is wrong? What is going on?" Because I still didn't understand why I was on the ground. And he jumped back up on the tank and radioed. We have 2 wounded and 1 KIA. I'm like, KIA? I'm like, I'm here, Mike's here, Isaac's there. There's no KIA. So we lay there for a little while longer. And what I've been told, the first group that came from the FOB were ambushed. They shot out all the tires on the Humvees so bad that they had to return to the FOB and bring all the armor with them. I remember just laying there, and all of a sudden, people just start showing up. And I remember Doc came, and he told me, "I'm going to have to set your leg to put you on a back brace." I'm like, "Go ahead, it don't hurt." And he's like, "It's going to hurt." I was like, "Okay." And he gave me the first shot of morphine. And then he grabbed my leg. And it's kind of like somebody taking something from a fire pit and sticking it inside your body, and then you trying to get it out and you can't. So when he set the leg, then he had to give me another shot of morphine. And then Sergeant Jackson, my old tank commander, pulled up, and they're putting me on the back brace, and he said, "Did you check him for exit wounds?" And they're like, "No, Sergeant." And like, "Roll him over. Let's check and make sure he's got nothing on his backside." And I remember, I'll never forget it. When he rolled me over, his wrist went about that deep into the back of my leg, because the back of my leg was missing a big chunk. And I remember his eyes just get huge, and he said, "You're okay, you're okay. Give me some gauze. Give me some effing gauze." And he was packing my leg full of gauze to stop the bleeding from inside the back of my leg. Well, they rolled me back over and they put me on a back brace. And since I was down in the canal, they had to get a bunch of guys to carry me back out because a helicopter had landed right there on the top of the hill where all they had to do was go up the hill, get in the helicopter. We got in the helicopter and we're about to take off and I'm sliding out the helicopter and I tapped I'm high as a kite from all the morphine that they gave me. And I tapped the flight medic and I'm like, I'm giggling. I'm like, hey, you didn't lock the litter. And he was probably maybe 120 pounds. I mean, he was probably like this tall. And that dude tapped the pilot, told him, put it back down, and he grabbed my litter with one arm and locked me in. And then I was unconscious until I woke up in Germany. The German doctor, she couldn't speak really good English, and she didn't have very good bedside manner, but she said, you lost your leg, you broke your back, my name's blah, 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 and if you have any questions, and that was the last thing I remember. I had a trach, a German trach, where the German trach, you can't put your finger over the hole to talk, so I couldn't talk to nobody. I didn't know what had happened. It didn't click in my mind, so I thought I was captured. So when the nurses would come to tend to me, the first one got it in the nose, and then the next one I bit. And then they gave me the juice to knock me out, and I woke up in handcuffs, like the strap handcuffs that go up against the bed. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm captured. Because none of them spoke English. It was either French, German, or Russian. I couldn't understand any of them, but I knew it wasn't American. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm captured. And I'm in somebody's kitchen because they had like a kitchenette over there. It was weird. I heard plates. I'm like, am I in a hospital or a restaurant? It was just like all this clanging. I'm like, okay. So while I'm laying in bed, I would work on them restraints, and I'd get one off, and I hold my hand there. Every time they look at me, I put my hand back up so they couldn't see what I did. And finally, the American liaison came in with my dad, and they explained what had happened, that an IED went off underneath the tank, and me and Mike were ejected, and Isaac was decapitated from the shoulders up because the bomb went off right behind his head. We laid there for probably, it was 30 minutes before we didn't make radio contact. We were supposed to make radio contact every 30 minutes. And when they didn't receive radio contact, that's when they came and started looking for us. So we were probably on the ground for maybe 40, 50 minutes before first aid came. And I don't know how long it was before the helicopters came. I talked to Mike's mom, and Mike, he died from shock. He had one bruise above his eye, no broken bones, no bruises. His heart couldn't take it. So I am the only survivor of the tank. That day, our lieutenant, who was the tank commander, and he has a lot of PTSD over this, but he decided that he was going to stay back and read a book while we went on the mission, which was fine because we really didn't need him, but he has a lot of issues now because he feels like he should have been there. And I tried to tell him, you would have been dead too. So they said if I wasn't as big as I was, that piece of shrapnel would have went all the way through my heart. So praise the Lord, I'm a big guy. When I woke up in Germany, I had been in a coma for a month, and I didn't know that this was amputated because they kept a cover over me. And the first time I saw it, I was like, what happened? Being paralyzed. The part that hurt the worst was my face. I got blown apart, like my nose was over here and my lips were over here. I wasn't always this pretty, but they patched me up. It felt like somebody took a bat to my face. It really hurt. This felt like a sunburn. This felt like I got beat up. But a lot of new scars and a lot of new problems. And you meet people like Angela and her Hits for Heroes, and then you meet guys like Jeep Sullivan with Wounded Warrior Outdoor Adventures. You meet guys like that, and they help your mental well-being, because then whenever you're paralyzed and one-legged and you're about to get discharged from the Army, you're like, what am I going to do? I got family I got to take care of. Just so much. But one of the things that I like to leave people with is, whenever I was there, I knew Jesus Christ. I'd known Jesus Christ since I was 13, but it never came up in conversation. I never took the time to tell people about him. It wasn't that I was scared, because I was one of the biggest guys in the battalion, but it just never came up in conversation. And now I don't know where my friends are. I was on probably the baddest machine on the planet. In 1 second, I went from you can't touch me to I'm going to die without somebody helping me. It was that quick. And I try to tell people, you're not promised one more second on this earth. Not one more second. You walk out the door, you might have a heart attack, car accident. You just never know. I mean, I look to the younger kids that, still think they have a lot of life left in them. You just don't know whenever you're out there. You don't know when you're going to draw your last breath. And I try to tell people, you have an insurance policy, and one that's always good. If you accept Jesus into your heart, it doesn't matter what happens to you. You're going to heaven. But I didn't tell my friends that, and I live with that every day. I never shared the gospel with them. But when your heart stops a few times and your lungs collapse and your whole world's wrecked, you don't get scared much anymore. You don't care what people think about you. The only thing you really care about is the one who saved you. That you could be with him forever. I don't want to disappoint him before you think about it. He cares about right. He cares about right. Day forward, from this minute forward, from this day forward, from this minute. And we see how the world's going right now. It's a mess. I ain't never seen so much satanic crap in my life. But you don't have to worry about that whenever you have Jesus. Just that name is so powerful. So I would encourage you. Encourage your families. Don't wait till Easter. Don't wait till Christmas. Do it now. Before you leave here, accept him into your heart. So you don't have to worry about the worries of this world anymore. Because one day, I know a lot of people just don't think about it, but one day we're all going to give an account. We're all going to die one day. But when we do, when you've accepted Jesus, you ain't got to worry about it. The ones that don't have to worry about it. So don't leave this place having to worry anymore. Don't worry anymore. I think the Bible says 365 times, do not fear. I think that's one for every day of the year. Don't fear anymore. Have Jesus in your heart. Have courage to tell people how Jesus makes you feel. Because we need a lot more of that these days. We don't need any more Cardi B. We don't need any more of this bull crap that's out there anymore. We need to get to the point where people are not afraid to stand up for Jesus Christ anymore. before it's too late. I'm not here for doom and gloom, but I wanted to end on a serious note that this is your time. You've been appointed a time to accept the Lord. So when you die, you had no excuses not to, because somebody told you about Jesus Christ. I'm telling you that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the light. He's the only way. There's only one way to heaven. It's through Jesus. Accept him into your heart and don't worry anymore. I thank you for your time. If there's any veterans out here, could you raise your hand? Thank you all for paving the way for us. I appreciate your service, and I thank you for being here, and I thank you all for letting me speak. I hope you have a blessed day, and thank you.